As a white gunman walks free, American justice is judged again. Kyle Rittenhouse shot 3 people, killing 2, but a jury ruled he acted in self-defense. Does the verdict smack of white privilege, or is it proof that the process works? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the U.S. justice system. On August 25th, 2020, Kyle Rittenhouse shot 3 people, killing 2, at a Black Lives Matter protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin. On Friday, the teenager was acquitted on all charges after a jury found he was acting in self-defense. In his first interview since the verdict, Rittenhouse, who toted a semi-automatic weapon to provide, some argue, unsolicited protection for private businesses, told Fox News he was only trying to help.
I was there just to help anybody that needed it. And shockingly, the only people I helped that night were rioters.
Well, the racially charged Rittenhouse case has both gripped and divided the United States. A campaign to pay for his legal funds raised over $2 million. And the teenager was backed by political heavyweights, including former President Donald Trump. But several Democrats, including New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, called the verdict disgusting. The trial itself was often tense and dramatic. When Rittenhouse testified, he was overcome with emotion, weeping as he claimed he was only trying to protect himself.
That's what That's what I run.
I didn't intend to kill them. I intended to stop the people who were attacking me.
By killing them?
I did what I had to do to stop the person who was attacking me.
By killing them?
2 of them passed away, but I stopped the threat from attacking me.
Well, his testimony may have convinced the jurors, but others across the United States were left outraged. Jacob Blake, the black man shot by police and left paralyzed from the waist down, was the reason protest kicked off in Kenosha last year. His uncle called Rittenhouse's acquittal an atrocity.
If anybody deserves the civil liberties that were abused in this case by a Caucasian young man that was 17 years old, we deserve those rights. We're paying for the people that shoot us in our backs. We're paying the taxes for the people that kneel upon our neck.
But the Rittenhouse case isn't the only trial that's brought America's racial divide back into the spotlight. In February last year, Ahmaud Arbery was unarmed and jogging in a residential neighborhood in the state of Georgia. 3 men who suspected him of burglarizing houses followed, shot, and killed the 25-year-old father, saying they were trying to make a citizen's arrest. And just like in the Rittenhouse trial, the defense claims they were acting in self-defense. The prosecution, however, says that racism was a key factor. Well, both cases have renewed the debate as to whether the U.S. justice system is institutionally racist. And the numbers appear to suggest there is a problem. Black Americans make up just 13% of the general U.S. population, but they're incarcerated at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. 1 in 81 black adults is serving time in a U.S. state prison. In 12 states, more than 50% of the prison population is black, and almost half of those serving life, life without parole, or virtual life sentences are black. So why is the U.S. justice system so frequently under fire for racial injustice? Well, to discuss that and more, I'm joined now from Washington, D.C. by Kelechi Egwim. He is the Executive Director of Appeal, a Black empowerment organization. Nate Lerner is in New York. He's a Democratic strategist and founder of the grassroots organization Build the Wave. And from Orlando, Florida, is Joseph Haynes Davis, a lawyer and expert in criminal and juvenile justice. He describes himself as a lover of the U.S. Constitution and supports the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Thanks all so much for being with us. Okay, let's start with the Kyle Rittenhouse case. It seemed at the beginning like the prosecution really couldn't have asked for more. You actually had video of him carrying an assault rifle and shooting and killing 2 unarmed people, unless you count a skateboard as a weapon. Yet here we are watching Rittenhouse walk free. Kelechi, I'll start with you. What happened?
I think that there's many things that sort of came together. To be honest, if I was on that jury, I probably would have brought about the same conclusion in the sense that I think that the judge, sometimes you need a good lawyer, but when it's really bad, you need a good judge. The judge pretty much set the tone, and by even limiting how the jury heard the case, where you weren't even allowed to refer to the victims as victims, you have to refer to them as rioters and looters. That type of tone and that type of guidance from the judge and those types of instructions, including allowing the jury to take their instructions home to their houses, which I've never heard of. All types of things were going on in that courtroom that, from the perspective of jurors, they were pretty much, had a case where, they would have had to really explain finding him guilty. Not to mention the fact that I think the prosecutor miscalculated. There was too much focus on what happened in the immediacy, not enough focus on why he was there and how he got there. I
Okay.
thought his mother was prosecuted.
But Kelechi, I mean, do you feel there was bias on the judge's behalf?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing in America that doesn't have a tinge of racial bias associated with it. And this judge wasn't necessarily trying to hide it. In his case, he just, there's always bias. I mean, human beings have bias. But when you have a responsibility to uphold justice, you need to make sure that you're given equity. And I've never seen a case where the prosecutor's hands were so tied, so tight, while the defense was allowed to pretty much do whatever they wanted to do.
Okay, let me ask Nate if you're on the same page there. Do you feel there was a judge with prejudice at play?
I think it's hard to say for certain. There certainly were a lot of signs to indicate that there was some bias on the judge's part. For example, one of the most well-known examples is when the judge refused to allow the victims of the shooting to be called victims. I've never heard of that before. I thought it was a bit odd, especially in a case this high profile. There was also an incident where his phone went off in court, and the song that played was, I think it was "Proud to Be an American," which is actually the song that Donald Trump often walks out on stage to. Doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it could be a sign. And for all intents and purposes, from most reports from the courtroom, he did seem to be a bit biased towards the defense. That being said, I think at the end of the day, the prosecution really dropped the ball. From what I read and from what I saw, they really presented a weak case. They underestimated the defense. Their witnesses sometimes seem to be helping the defense. I think the quote I saw that best summed up the prosecution was that they really did a great job presenting a strong case for the defense.
Okay.
I think going after first-degree murder as well might have been a mistake. It might have been a more strategic move to go after second or third-degree murder and also focus on some of the lesser charges, because in the U.S., especially with a lot of the self-defense laws the way they are, it is harder to prove first-degree murder, especially when you have video of the defendant being attacked.
Okay.
And, yes, it was with a skateboard, but even so, the way the laws work in the U.S., if you feel under threat, you can defend yourself.
Okay, Joseph, I actually saw you quietly kind of laughing at one point there. What was your take?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Second of all, the fact of the matter is, here in the United States, under this great Constitution that we have, here in this great country that we have, the prosecution has to prove everything, and the defense has to prove nothing. And in this instance, prosecution was successful in weaving, in particular in the summation, weaving admitted facts to the jury, weaving it with the statutory references having to do with self-defense and the use of lethal deadly force. In this instance, the defendant who has been exonerated, Mr. Rittenhouse, had a right to be where he was. His father lived there. He had family live there. He had the right to carry a long gun, a rifle. And let me also say that the use of the term AR-15, it's fine, but it has been used so much negatively, it demonizes what I call the latest in self-defense technology. That is a rifle, and
Okay.
it is a lawful rifle, if I may. It is a lawful rifle, and he was carrying it lawfully, openly, as per the statute with his age, which
Mm.
was plus 16, period. That's what it was under Wisconsin law. Now, if you'd like, we can debate Wisconsin law. If you like, we can debate the Second Amendment right to
Yeah,
keep and bear
we
arms.
obviously don't have time to do that, but I'm just going to ask you as quickly as possible, Joseph. You know our time is limited. I mean, what kind of example then do you think this sets that there is a right of a person to take that kind of assault rifle into a public space at a charged time? Well, I'll try to phrase it mildly. Do you not fear the example this sets going forward, that people can use? They can take the law into their own hands and now use Kyle Rittenhouse's case as a precedent at any point that they see that people are being threatened, they decide that this is what they need to take action on. They can find a cause, go out there, arm themselves, and shoot and kill in self-defense.
Well, the way you phrased it is questionable, respectfully. The fact of the matter is, it depends on what the statute says. In Wisconsin, you can open carry rifles, and that's what that is, a rifle. Now, as to what you are implying, that it allows for some type of unhinged vigilantism, I disagree with that and I reject that because there are millions upon millions of Americans who are law abiding citizens that own rifles, high capacity, rapid fire weaponry, and nothing happens every day.
Okay.
And I can submit to you respectfully, I'm one of those Americans. I own
Okay.
two so-called AR-15s, and nothing happens every day.
Okay. I'll tell you what, I mean, separate to the issue of the right, to bear arms and to carry them into certain situations, separate from that, I want to go back to Kelechi about the trial itself, and not just in Kyle Rittenhouse's case, but also in the Ahmaud Arbery case that is still underway right now, and that people argue the real issue here, it's not even about white privilege, it's about financial privilege. Kyle Rittenhouse had $2 million in his defense fund, using the same jury consultant, actually, that O.J. Simpson had, so they could rehearse, putting him on the stand and seeing if that would work. Is that arguably, Kelechi, where the real injustice might be? It's that people that have money can win trials that other people would simply lose?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the big flaws with the U.S. justice system. But the other question is, how did he get that money? In other words, he was lauded as a hero by people who call themselves, gun rights advocates, but also folks who call themselves supporters of what they will call white power or white justice or the feeling that somehow white men are now being victimized. So people like that donated money and gave him a chest full of money to be able to buy the most expensive lawyers. Black defendants don't get to do that often, and neither do white defendants who are not seen as supporting this idea of white supremacy. So, and not only did he have the extra funds to buy the most expensive lawyers and team out there, but the source of the funds is interesting. How certain people get supported by certain people, when it comes to raising money for their defense, and that's a big flaw in the justice system, is that if you're a poor person and you happen to be on the wrong side of a cause, if you will, then you don't get that support.
Okay, Nate, I mean, go ahead, Joseph. I'll let you respond quickly. I can see you want to.
I absolutely reject that because the bottom line, the fundamental bottom line, is that anyone can raise funds. If there is a Black defendant, if the Black community were to get behind that Black defendant and raise funds, they could raise funds to help substantiate that person's defense, first of all. Second of all, with all due respect to the good professor, the good doctor, because I've read his profile, and it's very, very impressive. The fact of the matter is, no one on this panel knows exactly who contributed to Mr. Rittenhouse's defense fund, and anyone could. Some people could do it anonymously. And quite frankly, again, any defendant who people want to support can create a GoFundMe and raise those funds. So the question becomes, when the number of Black defendants are in the system, why don't those communities support those Black defendants, which I have represented as a criminal defense attorney here in Central Florida, as court appointed, et cetera. That is the issue. I mean,
Okay.
anybody can support anybody they like, with all due respect.
Okay, Nate, I mean, let me bring you back in. Is that fair? I mean, should other defendants be able to kind of raise that kind of money for their defense when they have a case that merits that kind of legal strength, legal team? Is it possible for everyone then?
Yeah, I think that's fine in practice. The problem is that Kyle Rittenhouse was able to raise $2 million because he really became a hero within the right-wing community. And that's a bit concerning, because that gets back to the problem that you mentioned of encouraging vigilantism. This is someone who really should not be celebrated because he showed up to an already tense situation and made it worse. He was actively walking around with a gun, and people thought he was an active shooter. That's actually why he was attacked. Some of the witnesses said, because people thought, first of all, that he became an active shooter, the people were then acting because they were trying to defend their community, they thought. And that's the reason that the witness who was shot and survived said that he was approaching Rittenhouse. So what you have now is you have a young man who's being celebrated as a hero, who's really being lionized within the right-wing community. And now that you have him getting off without being found guilty of any charges whatsoever, which to me doesn't make any sense. And as you mentioned, that sets a very dangerous precedent, both in the justice system and in the culture, for future incidents like this to occur. And so it's very scary to think about all the young men with guns sitting at home who are going to be the next Kyle Rittenhouse, showing up next time there's a protest or unrest in their communities, instead of letting the authorities handle it.
But Joseph, you're not scared at all.
Let me address Mr. Lerner and his comments directly. The fact of the matter, sir, is that there was a riot going on in Kenosha. Okay, there was burning and looting for 3 days. And if you looked at the video, that was a small community. The business community is connected adjacent to residential areas. It could have been very easy that those residential areas could have been subjected to burning and looting as well. Second of all, the lionization, as you suggested, of Mr. Rittenhouse by the so-called right-wing community, I would submit to you that it is a lionization of those who support the right to self-defense with lethal deadly force as set forth by the various statutes. Third of all, with how maybe the Democrat and left propagates their positions, and you respectfully are a part of that. That's what you do. You drive this narrative that is counter to what the admitted facts were. Apparently, some on the left ignore the admitted facts of the rioters also openly carried weapons, and not long guns. They openly carried handguns, which is not permissible, as I understand it, under Wisconsin law at all. So again, the young
Okay.
man, Mr. Rittenhouse, had a right to defend himself, and this narrative that's being propagated ignores facts, and that's also a problem, not only from those who utter it, but from the media that regurgitates it.
Okay. Nate, I can see you strongly disagree, but I also saw Kelechi disagree. Go ahead, Kelechi.
Yes. And here's some facts. One fact is Kyle Rittenhouse was initially charged with illegal possession of a weapon by underage person. Apparently, there was no law, but somehow he managed to be charged by it, which the judge dropped. Because of what I believe to be his own bias. So there must be a law against him carrying that gun if he was charged with carrying a gun at that age. So that's one
There's
fact
no
that
statute.
what
Go ahead, Kelechi.
fact. I'm just pointing out the facts. The day this happened, there was no burning going on. There was no looting going on. There was no rioting going on. It was just a protest. All the fires, yes, there was rioting and burning and looting in that business district days before. That particular day, that wasn't what was happening. So and he's not from that town. This small town you're talking about, that's not where he's from. He had to drive from Illinois to get to that town. These are
He
facts.
actually does work there. He was a lifeguard at the Kenosha County Beach.
And Kenosha was 13 miles away, and his father lived there. Okay, so he frequented there, and if his father lives there, one could argue that he lives there.
Okay. Yeah, regardless, I mean,
and-
some of those facts are disputed about what his real
Well,
connection
those
to
are
the town
admitted
was, but we only have
Those
a
are
few
admitted
minutes
facts.
left. Yeah, we only have a few minutes left, and I do want to move forward to the Ahmaud Arbery case that's underway right now. And Nate and Kelechi, I mean, the defendants in this case aren't going to have the privilege of a $2 million legal defense. Nate, do you think that's going to make a fundamental difference in the outcome of their case as compared to Kyle Rittenhouse?
One thing, unfortunately, in our judicial system, the money does matter, and so that will, of course, make a difference. This case, for me, I think actually is much more significant. And I think if the defendants are found innocent, that will be much more indicative of racial bias in our justice system. I think that this case is outrageous. The entire incident is outrageous. It was really disgusting to see that this is happening in modern times. That murder was just incredibly heinous. And so I do hope that they are found guilty, and I think all signs point to the fact that they will be, but we'll certainly see.
Kelechi, quickly.
Yes, I want to first of all commend the people of Georgia for canceling and removing that law that they're trying to rely on, which is really a law that was created to allow white slave catching terrorists to find black men who they can say ran away from their imprisonment on the plantation, to give them the right to legally catch them, kill them, and do whatever they had to do with them. So this is a law that's in the books, and it should have been removed a long time ago. I'm glad that it was finally removed, but that they're relying on it. Obviously, this was before the laws were changed. We certainly, hope for justice for Ahmaud Arbery and his family. This is a young black man, going for a jog, thinking he had the right to run the public road, and unfortunately, being confronted with folks who didn't think he shared that right with them.
Okay, Joseph, quickly, 1 minute. I mean, do you think Ahmaud Arbery should have died for those men's right to self-defense?
Well, of course not. And let me say that based upon the facts, and everybody on this panel has to remember that a jury makes their decision based upon admitted facts, period. None of us have been part of a jury. I know I haven't. But in this case, it appears that the fact of the matter is that young man died unreasonably, and the defendants, it looks like, should be convicted. And I believe that that would set a tone for those who embrace, as what you all call, white supremacy, and what it is in those instances where the
Okay.
facts show that's what it is.
I'd like to revisit that case once the verdict is announced with all three of you, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists really so much for taking the time to be with us, and our viewers, of course, for tuning in as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at @the_Newsmakers. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.